John Tortorella is out of as coach of the Philadelphia Flyers. The Canucks and Islanders in a game both teams desperately needed to stay alive in their respective wildcard races, and the Oilers and Stars played a very weird game, all on today's edition of Locked On NHL.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's edition of Locked On NHL. I am Nick Zararis, the host of Locked On Oilers. That's my good friend and my co-host, the co-host of Locked On Penguins, Hunter Hodes. We have a whole lot to get to on today's show, but before we get there, thank you to everyone who is making Locked On NHL their first listen of the day. Locked On NHL, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As we said at the outset, a lot to get to. John Tortorella out after several seasons in Philadelphia. That's where we're going to start today's show. We're going to transition talking to the Islanders and the Canucks, and then we'll wrap today's show talking about the Oilers and Stars game. So at the outset of this conversation, I think we should address the fact that the Flyers, when John Tortorella got there, kind of just needed a babysitter. They needed an adult in the room who could kind of weed out the guys that the organization wanted to see if they were worth keeping around, because we all knew this was how this was going to end. This is how every John Tortorella tenure ends. He wears too thin on guys after a while, because you can only be that militant disciplinarian mind games head coach for so long before it really starts to wear thin on guys. And that was the case here. The Flyers, to their credit, punched massively above their weight last season and played really good hockey last year for a team that didn't have a lot of talent. And this year, there was a reasonable expectation that they were going to take a step. No one was saying playoffs, but build off of what they accomplished last year. And instead, it's been weird. You know, guys have gotten healthy scratched at various points. Tortorella has been increasingly passive aggressive. What he had said a few weeks ago about, well, if Carter Hart was here, we would have a different team and we wouldn't be as reliant on Ursin and Fedotov. So as we sit here, we knew this was going to happen at some point. I'm a little surprised they did this with 8-9 games to go in the regular season. They just didn't wait 2 weeks, but we knew this was coming eventually.
But Nick, that's the thing. He kind of forced Danny Briere's hands after what he said earlier this week. Torts was kind of like, yeah, I'm really not interested in coaching this team with where they are right now, where they're playing and all that. And it's like, you basically just asked the front office to fire you during that media conference. They kind of had no choice. I feel like some people are missing that when it comes to this conversation. People are like, well, why didn't you just wait for 2 weeks? And it's like, well, they were probably going to, until Torts was like, yeah, I really don't have any interest in learning how to coach this team right now. He did say he has to do a bit of a better job, but still, when you say something like that, you are telling the organization to fire you. And that is exactly what Danny Briere and the rest of the front office did this morning, and they let Tortorella go. And it feels like every Tortorella tenure with a team goes something like this, Nick. He gets them to punch above their weight class for that first year. They play really hard under him that first year. Carries over sometimes in that second year, but then right after that, Nick, it feels like players' patience with him wears thin, and then he kind of loses the locker room, Nick, in that third or fourth season if he gets it. It feels like he's a really good short-term coach to have, but long-term, his shtick gets old fairly quickly. At least that's what I've noticed, man, when I've seen his different tenures, the Rangers, even Columbus, Philadelphia.
Don't forget the Canucks in there. Don't forget his 1 year in Vancouver.
We're getting to Vancouver a little bit later because that was a great game against the Islanders last night. But still, it feels like that's how almost every single one of his tenures go. And I'm curious to see now, is he done coaching? Will he be an assistant somewhere? Is he going to go back to ESPN and do some studio analysis? Curious to see what it means. But again, not surprised that they did it today after the comments that he made. And they're also just having a really rotten season. I was at the game a month ago when the Flyers came here. They were actually up 3 goals in this game. And the Penguins, right after that, they blitzed them. And the Penguins, for everyone knows, the Penguins have not been a good team this year. They're one of the worst teams in the league, especially in the Eastern Conference. But you could tell while watching the Penguins start to come back, the Flyers' body language in that game was really poor. They knew they were going to blow that lead in the second and third period. And it just feels like I don't know. It honestly kind of feels like they quit on him towards the late stages of the season. I mean, they've lost 6 in a row. They've lost 9 of the last 10 games. They're going to get probably a top 4 pick in the draft if I had to guess. But I'm curious also to see what they do next for this head coaching position. I think someone like Rick Tocchet there makes a lot of sense if Vancouver lets him go. But I'm not sure that they're going to. But I just had to throw it out there, my friend.
Let's start to Rachel of Locked On Flyers for more.
Hi, this is Rachel Donner from the Locked On Flyers podcast, reacting to the breaking news Thursday morning that the Philadelphia Flyers have relieved head coach John Tortorella of his position behind the bench. And we've been talking about this potential for several weeks now, as both co-host Russ Cohen and I have noticed a lack of enthusiasm and attention to detail in Torts' interviews. And this all came to a head after the most recent loss to Toronto, when he said, "I'm not really interested in learning how to coach in this type of season where we're at right now." Assistant coach Brad Shaw takes over behind the bench as interim head coach for now. He's got 9 games to show what he can do, as the Flyers and GM Danny Briere have a tough task ahead, finding the right person to lead this team through the rest of the rebuild.
So, Hunter, as we continue our conversation here, you mentioned it. Tortorella is kind of one of the last of his ilk, of that, both the old school disciplinarian mindset, and then number 2, just of his contemporaries. I mean, if you look around the NHL, you compare it to where it was 10 years ago. Yeah, there are still some holdovers. Laviolette's still kicking. Lindy Ruff is still kicking. Pete DeBoer. John Hines has been around for a little bit. There's a handful of those guys. But Tortorella predates a lot of those guys. You got to remember, I mean, they won that Stanley Cup in Tampa Bay 20 years ago now. He has been around a really long time. Like, in my mind, I consider Tortorella a contemporary of people like Bruce Boudreau, Claude Julien, guys of that ilk.
Kind of like Laviolette as well, Nick, because Laviolette, he's been around for a long time as well.
Laviolette's first year was 2001. I lump those guys all together, and we've seen Claude Julien's name come up a time or two for openings, but a lot of those guys, man, at a certain point, what else do you have left? And then number 2, after a certain point, the game does kind of pass you by, and not necessarily the tactics or the strategy, but like the people skills. Like, fundamentally, the guys in today's game are so different than the players that Tortorella was coaching 20 years ago. And yeah, that's a reflection on where society is and the culture changing and how we approach things. Because I think you would agree with me when you say you can't make the iron fist thing work anymore, because every guy is so specialized. Like, as a coach, you have a professional responsibility to meet all of these guys where they're at and work with them to get the best out of them. Trying to do the one standard, it's my way or the highway thing, all you're going to do is discourage guys when they feel like they're not playing well. And that's kind of what I feel has happened here. Well,
he was doing it part of the season, Nick, with Matvei Michkov, for example. He was doing it a little bit with Cam York as well. And those, I think, to me, are 2 pieces that the Flyers really want being here long term, especially Michkov. I mean, this is his first season. He's been already so good for them. I think he's going to keep developing into potentially, one of the best players, not in the league, in my opinion. But with Cam York, they want him to be a staple on that back end as well. And it just felt like every time there was a pressing matter when it came to Michkov or Cam York, Tortorella would kind of handle it the wrong way. So I feel like a new coach coming in here, handling it a different way, I think could pay huge dividends for both players. Because again, Michkov, he's already one of the top rookies in the league. They want him to be one of the best players in the league. You have to get his development right, considering how good he already is in the NHL. Then Cam York, I know been a little bit of up and down so far, but they want him to be a staple on their back end, at least to me. And you also got to get him right as well. So I think those are, at least for me with the Flyers, 2 pressing matters they have to address with the next coach. How do you get the most out of those 2 guys? Because, again, they're going to be here for the long haul, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, that team needs work. We all are in agreement that's a talent issue. That's not just that like Tortorella's not doing
need
a
more
good job
high-end
problem.
talent
They
still.
need more guys. They fundamentally need more guys. They need more veteran guys for those young guys to lean on. Trading Farabee and Frost midseason kind of ripped that group up a little bit. All those guys were really close. And I know there's a contingent of Flyer fans who very much dismissively look at that as they weren't that good. The team wasn't that good. Why do you care? Because the guys are upset. Like on some level, they're fundamentally upset, and it hasn't been the same since the trade deadline. So we are going to take our first break of today's show. When we come back, we're going to talk about that Canucks Islanders game where Ilya Sorokin got pulled, giving up 4 goals on 18 shots right after this. If you're like me, your morning has to start with a good cup of coffee. But I got tired of settling for grocery store brands that just weren't hacking it. That's why I turned to Trade. And let me tell you, next level coffee. Trade is the #1 specialty coffee marketplace in the United States, bringing you fresh coffee from over 50 of the country's top roasters. Their experts have taste tested thousands of coffees, curating over 450 amazing different roasts. Whether you're new to coffee or like me and know exactly what you want, they'll handpick the perfect match for you. Trade Coffee has a quiz where in under a minute they can match you with a roast that's fresh, smells incredible, and tastes even better. The subscription makes it so easy, no last-minute grocery store runs or settling for whatever's on the shelf. And if you don't love your first bag, no worries. Trade will replace it for free until they get it just right. And right now, Trade is exclusively offering our listeners 40% off your first order at drinktrade.com /lockedonnhl. One more time, that's drinktrade, TRADE.com /lockedonnhl for 40% off your first order. Drinktrade.com /lockedonnhl. Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for listening to today's edition of Locked On NHL. And Hunter, you and I have been very underwhelmed by the wild card races in both conferences. The East is worse. The East is definitely worse, where you have the 2 New York teams. You have Montreal. You have Ottawa. Columbus is still technically alive, but they kind of hit a bit of a wall there. And all of these teams have major flaws and are like, the Islanders have an island of misfit toys for a defense, and they've been missing Matt Barzal since like November, which has really done a number. They traded Brock Nelson. The Rangers cannot play defense in the slightest bit, and their power play is at like 11% over the last month and a half, which is really kind of indicative of how bad they've been when a team that's been top 5 on the power play for the last 4 seasons is in the 20s. Then you get to Montreal, who cannot defend. They are exciting and they score a lot, but they cannot defend. Ottawa, it seems like we can pen in that they're going to be the first wild card. But again, this is Ottawa. Until I see them there, I'm not going to believe they're playing a wild card series. I'm not going to believe they're a wild card team until we actually see it.
It's a turtle race of epic proportions, just like it was last year, Nick. It really is. But
that was only for one spot, at least. This year, we're still both.
This year, it's 2. And hey, I said it during one of the episodes of Locked On Penguins this week, because the Penguins play the Senators on Sunday. It looks like Ottawa is going to get one of those spots, and they're going to break this little drought, curse, whatever word you want to call it. But until I see that X next to their name, I'm still going to be like, okay, let's see what happens, because we've seen this before with the Senators. But I think as of right now, they are going to get in. Montreal, we'll have to see. They're having a dreamy season. Like this is, you want your young players to play in these types of games down the stretch, to have them at least learn what it takes to win meaningful games in the NHL. If you get in, that's an added bonus. You get these players to experience what playoff hockey is all about. And we said heading into the season, we wanted Montreal to take a step. We didn't think it was going to be the playoffs, but we wanted them to take a step. They have more than taken a step this season, in my opinion. Ottawa, they've taken more than a step as well. I think they're going to get in, but we have to see. The Islanders, I keep saying it, they're like cockroaches. They just don't go away. They really don't. But we saw last night, they did not play very well. Ilya Sorokin had a really poor game. He's had, in my opinion, a fairly good season. Like, I think when he's on, he's one of the 5 best goaltenders on the planet. I know there's some Islanders fans out there that treat him a bit weirdly. They think he's like a bit overrated and stuff like that. I personally don't see it. I think when he is on, he is one of the best goaltenders in the league. But, from a Vancouver's perspective, Nick, and we're finally getting to that now, that was a big time win. And you know what really impressed me about that when I was watching that game? They didn't really need a lot of their big dogs to win. Pettersson didn't do much. Quinn Hughes didn't do much. Brock Besser didn't do much. You had guys like Teddy Bluger score. Kiefer Sherwood scored. Derek Forbert scored. You had your depth guys really step up. Super important this time of year when you're fighting for your playoff lives. And, of course, I can't forget, Thatcher Demko once again. Is he 100% right now? Probably not. I mean, he's been battling injuries, it felt like, Nick, for the last year and change at this point. But he played his absolute heart out last night. And if the Canucks want to make the playoffs, they need him to stay healthy and keep giving them performances like this, because he has been sorely missed throughout the season. I thought he was sensational. He made a couple saves in the first period last night where I was like, holy crap. He was fantastic in that game.
I mean, people forget he was third in Vezina Trophy voting last year in the regular season. He was great. So we're going to throw it first to Trevor of Locked On Canucks.
Your Vancouver Canucks, they aren't dead yet. Not the deepest team in the NHL, but they've had unsung heroes step up night after night after night. Whether it's Kiefer Sherwood, Kevin Lankinen, Connor Garland, tonight risen from the injury ward, it was Thatcher Demko. A bit of a so-so return for him, but he stepped up big tonight for the Vancouver Canucks. And if the Vancouver Canucks are going to do the improbable and make the postseason, it's likely going to be because of a guy like Thatcher Demko leading the Canucks to a 5-2 win tonight and giving Canuck fans hope that the playoff dreams, they aren't dead yet.
So as we talk about the Canucks, and we'll get to the Islanders in a second, I feel they're the most talented of the teams that are in contention for those wild card spots out in the West, between them, Calgary, St. Louis, Utah. I feel like the Canucks are the most talented, but as we've long established this year, the issues there go beyond talent. There's definitely been something off for a good chunk of the season. I know there's been a bit of conjecture as far as Rick Tocchet's future there. We mentioned that last segment when we were talking about Tortorella. And it feels like that team is just destined to be in this perpetual boomer bust state of every 5 years they go kind of a little crazy. Like 2020, they made it to the second round of the playoffs. Last year, they made it to the second round of the playoffs. So in 2029, we should all get Canucks futures, and we should bet on the Canucks to make it to at least the second round of the playoffs. Because right now, I mean, I can't really understand why the Canucks are underperforming to the degree they are. Like, Pettersson's numbers don't look great. Besser's had a rough season after having 40 last year. And I just, fundamentally, I don't really get it.
Their big dogs just haven't been as consistent. Well, outside of Quinn Hughes. Quinn Hughes is having an all-worldly season. He's one of the best players in the world. If they get into the playoffs, Nick, it's going to be because Quinn Hughes is going to drag them in there kicking and screaming. Like that's literally what it's going to be. And if Thatcher Demko keeps playing, especially like this, it's going to be because of him as well. But I think a lot of it will be because of Hughes, because he's had such a great season. Pettersson, though, needs to be so much better. Like I saw in the playoffs last year too, wasn't nearly as good as he was during the regular season. He needs to, in my opinion, really wake up here down the stretch, because I agree. Like when you look at these other Western Conference teams in the wild card chase, Vancouver has more high-end talent. Their big dogs are better. They just need to show up on
they haven't played like it.
Yeah, no, they just got to show up on a more consistent basis outside of Quinn Hughes. The Blues, yeah, they're hot, but I still think at best they're, a little bit of an above average team that's good defensively. Jim Montgomery.
They play great defense. You give them credit for that. They play great defense.
Montgomery is a great coach. He's always been especially a really good defensive coach. So it's no surprise that they're playing really stingy in their own end, and they're red hot right now. They're getting contributions from all over their lineup. Their defense is playing fairly well, especially without Parayko, Nick. I mean, that's crazy that they're playing this well without Parayko. And right now, they have the inside track to get that final playoff spot in the conference. But if they cool off a little bit and Vancouver gets hot, this could be a different story. And of course, we have to throw Calgary in there. Dustin Wolf, he is having another outstanding season, and it's kind of the same like Quinn Hughes. If the Flames get in, it's going to be because Dustin Wolf drags them in there. Like, he's having such a great season for the Flames, and they're exceeding all expectations. So right now, Blues have the inside track, but let's see how these final few weeks play out, because the Canucks, they're trying. Like these last 2 games, they played fairly well. And the Flames, Dustin Wolf continues to be awesome.
So we're going to throw it to Gil for the Islanders reaction.
New York Islanders fall to the Vancouver Canucks 5-2 in a game that the Islanders, if they would have won it, they would have been in a playoff position for the first time since mid-November. Just a frustrating loss for once. Ilya Sorokin having an off game. 2 of the 4 goals that he let in before being lifted are goals that he would have wanted back. But once again, the Islanders in a big situation, just lacking the intensity. They give up a goal in the final 30 seconds of the second period, give up another goal in the first 65 seconds of the third period. Then the game goes from 2-2 to 4-2. Islanders had 2 power play chances in the third and could not convert on any of them. This is a big loss. Now they head on the road and are still on the outside looking in. For more in-depth daily coverage of your New York Islanders, check out the Locked On Islanders podcast.
And as far as the Islanders, I give them a lot of credit for not just waving the white flag, because like at 4 separate points this year, I've pronounced the Islanders dead because they're just such a miserable lineup. Like their lineup,
they do this every single year.
But like they've had Brock Nelson in the past. Like
I know
this lineup stinks.
I know they're not good, but they still do this every year. They are cockroaches. They start out a bit slow. Everyone thinks they're out of it, us included. And then they come right back into the playoff mix and like, oh yeah, remember us? Like, would you be surprised if they got one of those playoff spots? Because I wouldn't, man. I wouldn't. They literally do this every single year. And then they'll potentially flame out in the first round when they play Washington, for example, or something like that. But they do this all the time, even though you said it. This roster is not good.
No. And look, when they traded Brock Nelson, that told you they kind of knew they weren't that good because like he's been their second best player for a lot of the last few seasons. Barzal just being entirely indeterminate if or when he's going to come back from injury has really put a damper on their season. And they're in a weird spot organizationally. I'm sure we'll talk about Lou a ton this summer as far as the direction of the Islanders. But we're going to take one more break. When we come back, we'll talk about my Oilers. And they tried. They made a valiant effort to get a comeback in that game against the Stars. And we'll hear from Joey of Locked On Stars as well. See you guys in a sec. Did you just realize your business needed to hire someone like yesterday? How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. When it comes to hiring, Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other sites. Indeed sponsored jobs put your post at the top of the page and help you reach the right candidates faster. We've all been in that spot where our team needs the right hire like yesterday. The pressure's on, and every day without the right person is a setback to you and your team. That's exactly where Indeed sponsored jobs come in handy. They make sure your post is seen by the right candidates right now. And now you can speed up your hiring process with a $75 sponsored job credit. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Indeed is all you need. Thank you to everyone who is hanging out with Hunter and I on this Thursday edition of Locked On Oilers. And Hunter, the Oilers have issues, injuries that coming into last night's game. No Draisaitl, no McDavid, at least through the weekends. They're back tonight on the second half of a back-to-back. They play again on Saturday, and then they're not back till early next week. So you're missing McDavid, Draisaitl for 4 or 5 games. Stuart Skinner gets injured in the game last night. Zach Hyman gets injured in the game last night. Zach Hyman comes back into the game, but Skinner doesn't. Skinner gets injured. He gets what we're going to loosely say is a head injury, and we're going to assume is a concussion. The Oilers have not said exactly what it is. I do know he didn't travel with the team last night and stayed behind because after a concussion, you're not supposed to fly. So we can safely assume that's what they're dealing with there. And this brings what we've been talking about for months in a perspective that not only did you need another goalie in this room because your goaltending hasn't been good enough this year, But now you're looking at Calvin Pickard, who has not been a starter in the NHL since 2017, having to start multiple games in a short period of time. Was it a masterstroke when Chris Knobloch went to him for games 4 and 5 against Vancouver last year and saved their season? Yes. I do not feel comfortable with Calvin Pickard needing to start multiple regular season games in a row. And they have enough of a points cushion where this shouldn't be like an existential issue. But right now, if you're telling me that we have to start Pickard for at least a week or two, that definitely puts a bit of a damper on my excitement on any momentum they could be building over the next few weeks. And that's really the key for me as we get to this final 10-game pocket for the Oilers. They need to start building momentum towards the playoffs and playing good hockey on a nightly basis, because it's been so up and down over the last month and a half that it's hard to feel confident right now.
Yeah, it felt like when you compare this to last year, the Oilers were so hot going into the playoffs. It felt like, Nick, they'd go on a long winning streak, they'd maybe lose one or two, but then they'd go on another long winning streak. Like they would put together winning streaks in bunches, and they were red hot going in. And you saw that, the new coach bump was very real after they hired Knobloch. Got them into the playoffs, and they were just blitzing teams left and right. Yeah, I know. They had a really tough second round against Vancouver. That was one heck of a series. But they were still playing so well in the playoffs. They get to the final. They come so close to pulling off one of the greatest comebacks that we would ever see potentially in sports history. If they were able to pull it off, it would have been one of the greatest comebacks we've ever seen. But still, they were red hot going in. This year, it's anything but that. Part of that is the injury bug with Draisaitl and McDavid being a bit banged up. But another part of that is like they just haven't been as consistent defensively in their own zone. Like that's the biggest thing also for me. Another thing, they're not getting some of the depth scoring this year that I think they thought they were going to get. For example, someone like an Adam Henrique hasn't been as good all year, at least to me. Corey Perry, Victor Arvidsson, etc. Now,
I'll give Perry credit.
He did cool last night. I'll say that.
No, Perry's like 4th on the team in goals or 5th on the team in goals. Like I give Corey Perry a lot of credit for the seasons he's having, playing 11, 12 minutes a night. But like that's an indictment of your team that Corey Perry's like 4th or 5th on your team in goals right now. They've had scoring issues. They're going to finish, I think it's 26, 27 goals, fewer than they scored last season. And look, some of that is Kane has missed the entire season. He had 20 last year. Hyman is going to finish with about half of what he had last year. Fogle and Holloway, both, you lose those guys. McLeod's depth scoring. Skinner and Arvidsson haven't worked to the degree that was expected. And McDavid is only going to finish around 30 when you would probably expect him to be closer to 35-ish. So everybody's kind of regressed simultaneously. I do want to investigate whether that's a league-wide thing. I want to go team by team and compare their goal-scoring totals this year versus last year. But we should throw it to Joey of Locked On Stars for his reaction.
It was too close for comfort, but the Dallas Stars were able to hang on for a 4-3 victory over the Edmonton Oilers thanks to a Jason Robertson natural hat trick in the second period. But head coach Pete DeBoer was not thrilled with his team's play. He used the adjective sloppy and immature to describe his club in the first and third period as the Oilers made a late push. Jake Ottinger was superb. He stopped 41 saves on the night, and thankfully the Oilers were without Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl. Otherwise, this scoreline could have been completely different with the Oilers having 6 power plays on the night. And it's a worrying trend for Pete DeBoer and Stars fans that the Stars are playing this type of hockey just a couple of weeks away from the Stanley Cup playoffs. But saying that, you're not going to apologize for 2 points and another win on the road, and they get to get back at it tonight against Calgary. So all in all, a good 2 points, and you move on.
My big question for the Stars is getting everything kind of going. I said it right before that about the Oilers that they got to start building some momentum, and the Stars are in a better run of form than the Oilers as of late, but Rantanen, they haven't really figured out how they want to deploy him yet, who they want to deploy him with. We still don't know about Miro Heiskanen, when he'll return come playoff time, and the Stars have as talented a group as anyone in the entire league. but it hasn't been as smooth for them as it was last year. You know, they were right there with the Rangers for the President's Trophy last year, and they've taken a bit of a step back from that. Of course, the right side of their defense is definitely a bit concerning. You're looking at Lyubushkin, Matt Dumba, Cody Ceci. None of those guys is inspiring a whole lot of confidence. You drop Heiskanen in there, you assume he's going to play on the right side on one of them and bump one of those guys out entirely. But that might not be until the second round of the playoffs. So there's a lot the Stars need to figure out. I'm happy that they're starting to make some headway, because I really don't want the Stars playoff run to be a referendum on the Rantanen contract, because I think that's boring. I don't think that's an interesting conversation to have, because that's what's going to end up happening if the Stars go on a deep run. Wow, it was so great they traded for Rantanen. Or if they get bounced early, why'd they trade for him? There wasn't a fit there.
Well, Nick, at least Rantanen is there for the long haul. That's the important thing. So it's not just, this year, they have him for plenty more years after. But I still like the way the Stars started the game last night, but the way they ended got a little too close for comfort here. I still think when I look at the Stars lineup, to me, 1 through 12, they have one of the deepest forward groups in the league. Like, they are fantastic. You added Rantanen to that group. They're going to be that much scarier heading in the playoffs. You look at the standings right now in the Central Division. They're second, 96 points, 46, 21, and 4. They're closing in on making the playoffs. I mean, it's like, Nick, we're going to get Dallas, Colorado first round. And that's going to be a war, man. Like, I hate the playoff format. I've hated it since they brought it into the league, but I am stoked for that. Just both fan bases are going to eat each other alive. The Mikko Rantanen revenge season is in full effect, potentially. That is going to be an awesome series, and I can't wait.
Hey man, you saw Nate Dogg in the Four Nations. That's a killer right there, man.
Yes.
That's one of that is fundamental. That's how I ultimately, when you're talking about a playoff series like that, where we're talking about two teams that are pretty evenly matched, where there's stars, there's depth. Ultimately, I'm going with the team with the guys who have done it. And that's why when we did this show the day of the gold medal game in the Four Nations, I said I'm taking Canada, because they've got McDavid, Crosby, and McKinnon. And that would probably be my determining factor. Like, I think on paper, you could really make an argument the Stars are a better lineup. I think the Avs probably win because their guys have done it. And that's really the difference for me.
I think that's fair, because you saw how that series against Winnipeg for Colorado went last year. A lot of people, were taking Winnipeg like, oh yeah, this Winnipeg team is so good. And then, Nick, we saw Colorado's big dogs. They were killers. Nathan McKinnon went off. Cale Makar went off. Like, they were just like, you know what? Our big dogs are going to show up, and we're going to play better than your big dogs. And that's exactly what happened in that series. Yeah, Connor Hellebuck did also not play well for the Jets in that series, but McKinnon and them showed up, and they're like, yeah, I know some people are down on us and our goaltending may not be that good. And I think their goaltending is still a little bit of a question mark this year as well. But it didn't matter last year because Nathan McKinnon and them showed up. So I don't know who I would take right now. I think it would go 7. I'll say that. But you can make an argument for either of those two teams to win that series, because I do think I would agree. The Stars are deeper, but I trust Colorado's big dogs a little bit more in that series.
I agree with you in that respect. And that'll do it for today's edition of Locked On NHL. Thank you to everyone who made Locked On NHL their first listen of the day. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts or over on YouTube. Hunter and I will see you guys next week. If your team's alive in the wild card race, best of luck.